Welcome back. In this episode, I interviewed 3 people, Grant and Jane Gallagher, who together own Diamond Cross Ranch up north from Jackson and east of Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. I also interviewed their niece, Jamie Young, who lives on the neighboring land, Fates Ranch. I started by asking the same question. What are the pros and cons to tourism in this valley?
I think the pros outweigh the negatives because this is a location where we depend on tourism. And so, yes, there are some cons, which would be driving from Moran to town in the summertime is always a drag because there's a million cars in front of you and they're stopping to see everything. I think most locals, that can all kind of get on their nerves a little bit. But the pros are that they keep our little Teton County going. And so they are the ones who are supporting small businesses. They're the ones who are, buying things in town and really keeping our little community going. And if we didn't have tourism, then, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. And Jackson as a town is very successful. And so I think that, yes, it can get crowded and it can get agitating, but we should really be thankful for people that do want to come and visit and buy things. So, yeah.
Well, the pros, of course, is a lot of us make our living from the tourism, so it's a good thing, and it helps the state, especially since we've lost a lot of our mineral industry. We like to meet visitors from out of state, out of the country. It's an amazing place where people come from all over the world. So you can look at it as bad, but I don't want to look at it as bad. We think it's great. The con is the congestion on the roads, I suppose. The traffic in Jackson.
Jamie also has a business catering for weddings, so I thought it important to get her opinion on where to explore.
Probably one that I recommend definitely is just doing the Interloop Road because, it's even when winter is gone and you can drive the Interloop Road, even every year it's so amazing for me, and I still live here, but I just love to get close into the mountains, and it's just a totally different vantage point.
As are most things in the valley, tourism finds its way throughout. I asked how they blend ranching with tourism.
Well, it's definitely way more blended than it used to be, for sure. Jane and Grant, they have the Red Barn, so they do lots of events. And then me and my husband and my mother and father-in-law, we have cattle and ranch and do that. And so we definitely are more on the agricultural kind of doing that, but me and my husband started a little rental business also. So now in the summertime, I'm kind of doing events in different places. So that's kind of definitely blended our family into more of the tourism.
What we try to do on the ranch is obviously when you look out on the pastures, you'll see that they're still much like when I grew up. And this, looking all the way to the Tetons, this piece of property this piece alone belongs to 2 families, myself and my sister and her son and daughter-in-law. So, but what we've always tried to do, it's about like it was when we grew up. It's authentic, it's historic. We haven't really changed our lifestyle. Cattle are not our income. We do run cattle. Grant's a horse trainer, but we call it creative agriculture. We built a barn in 2004 after starting the business where we went as a horse whispering in 1997. And so to still be here, we love our open space, we love agriculture, but we had to be very creative and bring in other businesses.
Ranching has always been known as a tougher way of life, and I was curious if the challenges remain the same.
Well, it was hard 50 years ago. Don't make a mistake. My wife's family, they fed with horses all winter. They put their hay up with horse and, work horses. It was nothing but work, work, work. And that's where they all got their work ethic. They just, it's just part of ranching. It's not a 40-hour week. It's daylight to dark, and then you get home and you have to do all the other stuff. So to be able to stay here, maintain the ranch land, the open space. By the way, most of this ranch has been put over to conservation easements with the Jackson Hole Land Trust, which was a very good thing, because that way we can at least keep it in the family without getting taxed out of it from generation to generation.
There's challenges for sure. I don't know. I would imagine the challenges 100 years ago were quite a bit more than we have, just because you're homesteading and you can only imagine coming to a place like this and having to build your own home, having to, grow your food, and having the winters as they are. I mean, I'd say their challenges are quite a bit more life-threatening probably than ours. Although there's hardly any ranches, that are still ran by the family and ran here in Jackson. So I think that a lot of the challenges we have here are, just that you can't make a living off of just ranching anymore, unfortunately.
Ranchers have to survive in an economy like today where fuel prices are just extremely higher than they were last year, and they have to try to make a living at a time when things are there's very little profit to be made anyway, and so you have to really be wise with your money and probably live a pretty frugal life. We make a lot of our money off other businesses.
Now, Grant's main line of work is horse whispering, which is someone who has a rapport and intuitive connection with horses. They can be trusted in the careful training of horses, even those traumatized in the past, by whatever means to rehabilitate them and build trust.
I just found out that I could make a living doing something I loved, which was training horses, and it didn't really matter, what kind of horses, what discipline. I just loved training horses, working with them. I read a scripture in the Bible that said, "Any man that lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generally to anyone who asks, without finding fault." That's one of my favorite scriptures. So I started to ask for wisdom, and the answer to that showed up in a couple of men, two of which are known, and they're both dead and gone now, but they were known as probably the original founders of natural horsemanship, which has gone on to be called horse whispering, or they didn't claim that word at all. And I didn't either. I just saw the movie and I said, I can do that. And so we began to do demonstrations for the public just for entertainment. What happened was the corporations that come to Jackson Hole, there's a lot of them, they just loved it because they saw the leadership lessons in it. And so our business just took off, just word of mouth that way of doing that. And so that's been almost 25 years. We started with Microsoft, and we've had people from all aspects of leadership come here. We've had the American Bar Association. We have CEOs of companies and leadership teams, and we've had all 50 Supreme Court justices here. We've had vice president, just on and on. It's just been an amazing ride. I would have never, ever believed that could happen, but we feel like we have had an opportunity with this beautiful property to touch really the nations, and with a message that I believe is, very needed for today, and that is, how you work with a horse, how you communicate with a horse without abuse, and it's a great picture of parenting. It's a great picture of leadership. Now we're doing trainings and all kinds of things like that. It's not just entertainment anymore. They bring their teams here to experience, and they get a lot out of it. But every leader that's worth his salt, he wants to be better, and they always get something here, and that's why we wrote our book, Think Like a Horse.
I just had to ask more about his book.
But Think Like a Horse is really, comes from 40 years of professional horse training, but also those years of working with people, through polo, successful people. I was always working with people and horses. So you bring the two together, which can be, really a challenge. You're constantly trying to get better. There's a lot of great horse trainers out there, particularly now that we're in the, third and fourth generation of this natural horsemanship. So it's really more about psychology, working with an animal, rather than the old way of forcing them, which I grew up with. It was all about force, fear, intimidation, repetition. This is more of a negotiation. You give the horse the freedom to choose, but you also show him that there are consequences for wrong choices and rewards for right choices. But the horse really appreciates when he gets to make the choice, and it's wonderful to see the fear leave, the anxiety leave, the horse be comfortable with you, yet he's willing to work really hard for you. So it's really a philosophy more than a method of training. And once you learn the philosophy, you can apply it to all aspects of life, whether it's your dog or your cat or your kids or your employees, marriage. Yeah, it's just wisdom, I think, that comes from working with livestock. And these days, people aren't around livestock like they used to. They didn't grow up with them. Kids used to be, they always had a grandfather or somebody that had a farm. They had livestock, they go visit. Now that's changing. So we've lost a lot of that instinct now, and how to be around animals. And so we're just not as good around each other, really.
You all should check it out on Amazon as it is now out. I then wanted to know how or if the Western and ranching community plays into Jackson's culture.
Oh, that's a good question. And the question is, does it? We can call it Western, but I don't see it being Western as if you go to even central Wyoming, where people make it on the land. I think we'll always love the cowboy and the heritage of his integrity, his industrial lifestyle, his courage. We think of John Wayne always telling the truth. And when I think of cowboys, I hope that remains when they think of people on the land and the cowboy, that we don't vary from you're either honest or you're telling a lie. To me, there's no middle ground.
Unfortunately, I feel like in Jackson we're losing a lot of our Western culture. I think it's getting very trendy, which, don't get me wrong, I love to, go out to a nice trendy restaurant sometimes, that's fun. But I see that we're losing a lot of kind of the old feel rustic Western culture in Jackson. I mean, I feel like they try to do some of that, but I just think with the groups of people moving in, and the different people who get in office, it just changes the way of a town.
I asked Jane who is the most interesting person she has met while living here, and what is something underappreciated that she enjoys.
I've met a lot of interesting leaders. I can't bring it down to one person, but I will say with corporate groups, these leaders have taught us a lot, and I've met some amazing leaders, and I'll say there's several things about good leaders. For one thing, they're humble. They usually absolutely honor others, and they're great examples. I just like, for one thing, I like that by living close to the land, we get to see all the different seasons. Like now there's elk in the bottoms, and yesterday we rode down there and the killdeers they must have their nest somewhere, and they're, making their little noises and trying to steer us away from their nest. And the frogs, hear the frogs? The frogs are croaking. So living close to the land and appreciating especially the spring and summer season, those are normal things that I especially think about because I know when it's so quiet all winter.
Then I asked Grant if the impact of the Western culture spreads beyond the community.
The ranchers are being pushed out, so the days of ranching like it used to be is just over. And so it's just being limited to the little bit of places here in the valley where people still try to keep going, but it's very difficult.
So yes, as a conclusion, it seems that the modern day ranchers believe ranching exclusively to be largely a thing of the past for this area. Hopefully we will keep the ideals of the cowboy like Jane mentioned. In the valley, cowboy poetry is one of the more hidden gems of this culture. I asked Grant for his favorite.
Well, I don't know if this is a cowboy poem, but it's my favorite poem. It's by Edgar Guest, and it kind of fits what I do. I use it as a conclusion to my horse demonstrations I do. It's called See a Sermon. It goes like this. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than merely tell the way. For the eye, a better pupil, more willing than the ear. Fine counsel's confusing, but examples always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds. For to see words put into action, that's what everybody needs. I soon can learn to do it if you let me see it done. You can watch your hands in action, but your tongue too fast may run. And the lecture you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. Or I might misunderstand you in the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live.
That is all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Remember, if you want to watch the next one, follow along in the playlist I made. Bye!
I'm all hunkered down on my bedroll, that old moon over the hill. Tomorrow's another dusty day in driving, but tonight the world is calm and all is still. You know that God made me a cowboy for a reason. I never, not even once, wondered why. Maybe it's to do with how I'm seasoned. Makes me fitted to a cowboy's life.